Every once in a while, I find it necessary to put aside any prepared remarks I might have ready for a Shabbat or a festival and speak briefly from the heart about something a bit different. And this is one such occasion. I'm not exactly sure when the word Zionism became a dirty word, but there is no question that it has. And as of late yesterday, the statement by the head of Columbia protests, by Manny James, and yes, he did retract it, but the statement that first came about was, Zionists don't deserve to live. The crossing of a line is very clear. It is very obvious when people speak that way. It is clear that it is not the statement and the sentiment of all protesters, but it's enough, by enough, to cause us great alarm, great concern. And what I would simply like to propose today is that we begin to think about the following. What really is Zionism? At its best, it has not been a perfect national movement by far. It is not that we are not in a situation where there is no other national narrative to be encountered with when it comes to the land of Israel. That is very clear that there is, but at the same time, what has become the reality is that there is widespread adoption of what is a pernicious lie that has been expressed most vividly and powerfully in the Charter of Hamas, that among all national movements, Zionism is the most pernicious, most imperialistic, because it not only wants to conquer and maintain control over Palestine, but has visions to encounter and to conquer much of the world at large. Therefore, it must be opposed by any means necessary. I would like to simply suggest this morning that we begin to re-educate ourselves about what Zionism as the experience of the Jewish people throughout its history has always sought to be. It is expressed beautifully in the Haftarah that we read this morning. I suggested that one of the central interpretations of that Haftarah is the notion that the dry bones of the valley will once again come to life, that those exiled, ensconced in Babylonia will look upon this image conveyed by the prophet Ezekiel and say, yes, it is possible that this people can once again return to its land. And that throughout our history, we have dozens, if not hundreds, of reminders each and every day in liturgy, in our expressions throughout our daily encounter with Judaism, that the land of Israel is central to our identity. What is it we said at the end of the Passover Siddarim, L'shana haba'a b'Yerushalayim, and some add habenuyah? Next year in Jerusalem, a rebuilt Jerusalem, not a perfect one yet, but one day it'll be better. Over and over again. Birkat HaMazon, each time we have a festival or a Shabbat, B'shuv Adonai L'Tzion, when God took us back to the land of Israel, we were like dreamers. The aspiration has always been there. The breaking of a glass at the end of a Jewish wedding ceremony, a reminder of the lost temple and sovereignty in Jerusalem. And on it goes. I challenge any of us to find 5 pages in our liturgy that don't put the land of Israel in some place at the center of it. That has been the aspiration throughout the years. Never did Jews willingly leave the land of Israel en masse. Never did we give up throughout our history the desire to return. In my mind, I still think of the lament of Yehuda Halevi in the Middle Ages. Zion, 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 halo tishali. Zion, will you not ask for and intervene on behalf of your exiles and prisoners? It has been at the core of our identity. Mark Twain, who has some resonance in this city, in this community, said this back in 1898, Harper's Magazine. Spain decided to banish the Jew 400 years ago, Austria about a couple of centuries later. In all the ages, Christian Europe has curtailed his activities. Trade after trade was taken away from the Jew. He was forbidden to engage in agriculture, forbidden to practice law, forbidden to practice medicine, except among Jews. And on that went. And this was, of course, well before the horrible events of the 20th century. Zionism sought to do many things. It sought to create a new Jew, a new vision of who we might be, not a hunched over, passive, fragile being at the mercy of the host countries in which we found ourselves, but rather a triumphant individual and people that could seize control of its destiny once again. To be a place, to create a place where there would be refuge for Jews throughout the world who would suffer at the hands of those who were murderous, eliminationists, those who sought to keep us down, and at the same time to create a new possibility of re-entering history, and where Hebrew language was very much at the core of this. So David Gruen became David Ben-Gurion. Golda Meyerson became Golda Meir. This has been the path that helped to create a vision of the future. I would urge all of us to begin to seek an understanding of what this pathway has been for us throughout the ages, even before we seek to talk to others, and to realize that when others would speak about a Jewish national movement as being unique among all nationalisms in its desire to keep others down, to have problems with its other minorities within its midst, to all of the things that nations routinely encounter when they are seeking to try to build a national identity and location. If we are unique in that pathway, then that is anti-Semitism for all national movements. All national movements have engaged in these obstacles and challenges. It should be remembered that among the many things for which we recall the leadership of leaders throughout the era of Israel's history, Menachem Begin being in particular a kind of individual who many wanted to pick on because of certainly many of his stances were seen as uniquely harsh, uniquely unfeeling for the Palestinian and Arab communities within the land of Israel. It's also useful to recall that he was the one, of course, who was able to make peace in ways that others were not able to. It is useful to recall, too, that his very first act as prime minister in 1977 was to instruct an Israeli vessel to save dozens of Vietnamese boat people who were foundering in the ocean and subject to, of course, capsizing and death. Unique among the nations of the world, he brought those individuals to the shores of Israel and made them citizens. We are seeking in our own era, friends, to find a way out of the morass in which Israel now finds itself. We all are. We have many disagreements about how that should be done. There have been many disagreements about the nature of Zionism throughout its history and throughout its experience of trying to create a unique Jewish nation. But I will tell you this, if it is racism and if it is an act of hatred to suggest that Ilhan Omar and the other members of the designated squad should return home to their lands of origin, and it is racist and terrible to say that, then it is no less an evil to say that the Jews who live as Israeli citizens in the land of Israel should be returning back to Poland. And that is the rhetoric we are encountering today. So let us be not only defensive because we care about the state of Israel, let us understand and be able to stand proud of what Zionism at its best has been. That constant yearning to go back and to rebuild a land that we have had roots in since the beginning of time. Zion, which was a hilltop area in the city of Jerusalem, became identified with the city as a whole and the land as a whole. And it has been, at its very best, and even when it has floundered, an attempt to allow Jews to come home in dignity and to be able to be a free people, upright, proud, and capable of being ultimately a light unto the nations. I don't know how many of you caught a line in the Haftarah this morning, and with this we'll conclude. Ezekiel laments about the status of those bones, the status of his people, saying, Avda tikvatenu, we have lost hope. And what is it that we sing each and every day in Hatikva? Lo avda tikvatenu, we have not lost hope. Let us never lose hope. Let us always be capable of standing proud of understanding who and what our tradition, history, and narrative has been. Let us help shape it. Let us help create the conditions where it achieves its very best focus and expression. But od lo avda tikvatenu. It has given us hope and strength throughout the ages. With our help and with the goodness of the divine, it will continue to do so for decades and centuries to come.